we get into all of that, what did you think of all those ads, y'all? Were they a little bleak?
They're pretty scary. Like, it's just, and if you do watch his press briefings, they are kind of accurate. He always kind of says, like, it's not that big of a problem. We're doing a great job. We have some of the best testing, which just isn't true. And then he also did say a lot of it like it wasn't a big deal or anything before it became a big deal.
Like, I remember March 3rd. It was such, March 3rd was such a simpler time, an easier time. It's weird that it's like what the last day I actually saw all y'all was the day we took the midterm. Wild, right? Didn't think that would be the last time we would be together. That's crazy.
What?
So, I mean, have you noticed that like we haven't seen one, and I'm still looking for it. We haven't seen one ad from any super PACs or any group supporting Bernie Sanders. How is it that he's become absent in this whole talk?
Well, I know, like, his campaign said that they're more, like, right now they're more about getting through the pandemic and not really campaigning, which makes sense, and looks good too. And wasn't he was just involved in passing that whole economic stipend act and all that stuff. So
I know 1 week down, soon I'm gonna get that $1,200. But it doesn't matter if we're gonna be under martial laws. Like I won't be able to spend it anyway.
none of us get that.
Oh yeah, that's right. You are all
Yeah.
babies. But your parents, your
Yeah, my
parents
parents
and
will get
your parents and your guardians, they'll get that money. That'll be nice money.
it.
Oh, but for me, yeah, regardless, we won't be able to spend it if we're under martial law. Unless we buy it on, buy stuff online. But then who's gonna deliver it? Oh well, I'll figure something out. I'll burn it up eventually. Let's see. I was trying to think of was there any other things going off of talking about those press conferences, the president's ones. I watched the one yesterday, and I don't know if you saw the one yesterday, but it was a mess. They were all like clustered around these PowerPoint slides, and no, it seemed like none of them had the clicker. It was really weird. If I
That's
can
fun.
like if I could there was a they had a chart. It was like one of those exponential graphs, and they only had four color schemes for the entire nation. So like Kentucky, Rhode Island, and like South Dakota, they were all green. Georgia, South Carolina, and Ohio were red. And so they had like all these repeating colors on a graph, on a chart. And you really couldn't tell which line represented which state. And I was just sitting here like, all of these young people that work in the White House or all of these technologically inclined people, and nobody could figure out ways to delineate between each state on a chart.
That's ridiculous. I also think it's really funny that every time they have like a press conference, they talk about social distancing, but then they all like cluster around the one microphone and don't.
I'm convinced that it's like, I'm
This is
convinced the press conference room is like the size of a closet. And I think maybe it's just impossible. I would just like to believe that they don't have a choice.
I
It's
don't
gonna,
I don't know.
it's gonna get better. It's gonna get better. Martial law will kick in. It'll be fine. We'll all be able to leave our houses May 1st.
Well,
That's
I
my
would say
hope.
like, yeah, if martial law works and everyone and like it's pretty much numbers are way down by May 1st because no one can go anywhere and it just stops the spread, then I think it's worth it if we all just like everyone stays inside for 14 days. I
Yeah,
think that
so
that's not
long
a
as
bad strategy.
so long as the internet doesn't go down, so long as cable doesn't go down.
Oh yeah, if the internet goes down, everyone's screwed for like everything.
Well, I mean, not that bad, I guess. We can all go back to just watching plain old TV, suffer
Yeah,
through
but like
commercials.
think about all the students that have to do online classes and people that are still be expected to like work from home and stuff like that. It's
Well, I guess I'll say this now. If the internet goes out, that means we just don't have any more lectures. I mean, it's not like y'all had homework assignments anyway. And if it goes out, we'll figure out ways to get the presentations done. We'll figure it out. That means like I have to like smoke signal you on my cell phone number.
Good thing
Well,
I did my presentation before this happened.
I know it's like, yeah, this is not your problem, but for the rest of you all, we would figure it out that way. So fingers crossed. Hopefully the internet doesn't go out. I think what next Wednesday, that's our big presentation day. So I'm talking with Miranda after class today. The rest of you get on my calendar, get on my schedule, so we can spend all day Wednesday doing these presentations. So we can talk about them and we keep on moving forward. But yeah, if the internet goes out, we'll figure it out. But luckily, we don't have any reading quizzes unless you want to continue doing them in a way to recoup your midterm grade.
Mhm.
So I guess with that, let's slide into lecture. So yeah, we're talking about elections in America. Hooray! Lowy et al. Chapter 11, and then Andrew Gelman, Red State, Blue State, Rich State, Poor State, Chapter 2. So, of course, we know that in a democracy, frequent elections are key. And of course, in these elections, we, the people, get to choose agents to represent us, to act on our behalves. But there are two problems for people like you and I. There's the moral hazard problem as well as the adverse selection problem. Adverse selection refers to the problem of incomplete information, of choosing alternatives without fully knowing the details of all the available options. The moral hazard is the problem of not knowing all aspects of the actions taken by an agent. So for moral hazard, it's like, all right, I've picked a person to represent me, and you only get bits and pieces of what that agent does while representing you. So you don't know the day to day, all 24 hours a day, how that person spends their time while representing you. Meanwhile, for adverse selection, it's like choosing the worser of two evils, but even then, you don't know the total selection of it. I remember there was a political cartoon that was being passed around the 2016 election that showed showed a cow looking at like two different options. One said Trump, and on the other side it said Clinton. But what it didn't show for the cow was that on the other side, regardless of which door the cow took, it still led to the slaughterhouse. And so eventually, if I can find it, I'll post it on a blackboard. But that picture, that political cartoon, is like the best way to describe adverse selection because it seemed like regardless of the option, it still led to the slaughterhouse. But the cow does not know that that's what's on the other side of those doors. They just only see Trump and Clinton. So let's talk about the institutions of elections. And so, of course, there are election rules that are a mixture of federal and state laws, court decisions, and local administrative practices. And ultimately, all election law deals with or addresses is who can vote, how do we vote, where do we vote, and ultimately, what does it take to win? So electoral composition, ballot access and form, the districts, and then ultimately the criteria. So let's get into the first question. Who votes? In the beginning, so let's see, in the beginning, right after we became, right after we became a country, the only people that could vote up until, gosh, I want to say 1831, the only individuals who could vote were white men above the age of 21 who were Christian and owned land. That's it. So that would have been, it was like less than 10% of the population that you had to be white, Christian, land owning, and above 21. But they dropped the religion and land owning requirements in 1831, and in doing so, it expanded access to the ballot to about 90% of those who would be eligible, expanded to about 90% of all white men. Then, after they abolished slavery, and then, of course, the 15th Amendment was ratified, allowed Black men the right to vote. And then with the passage of the 19th Amendment, allowed women to vote. So, of course, yay, we're in the centennial ratification year and we're all stuck in our houses. Anyways, but that happened. And then up until 1971, you still had to be 21 in order to vote. But now, since 1971, 18-year-olds, the babies can vote. And so ultimately, voting is a privilege. It's not compulsory. So, depending upon where you received your education, I received mine in the Deep South. I'm talking about your K through 12 education. I was always taught that, voting is a privilege. You do bad things, you'll get it taken away from you, even though that's not true. It's a right. You have the right to vote.
Right.
But if we talk about, but when we're going back and talking about, what's it called? It's liberties, like civil liberties versus civil rights. And of course, liberties is what the government can't do to you, and then rights are what the government must provide for you. Yeah, it's a right, but it's not compulsory. You don't have to vote if you don't want to. It's the whole weird aspect of, like, every single election you'll always hear about some 90-year-old person, this is the first time they voted ever, and it's like, why? How did that happen? And the reason for that is because you don't have to vote if you don't want to. So, more on who votes. Back in 2013, there was a Supreme Court case, Shelby County versus Holder. The Supreme Court struck down a provision of the Voters' Rights Act requiring some jurisdictions to seek pre-clearance for new voting restrictions. So basically, immediately after not after the Civil Rights Movement, after the passage of the Voting Rights Acts of 64 and 65, there was a requirement within the law for districts within the Deep South that had historical practices of disenfranchising Black people, that every time they did their new redistricting practices, so this is really relevant. Today apparently is the U.S. Census Day, so take the census if you haven't done so. But anyways, after we all complete the census, after we do the census, then there's the whole process of reapportioning seats. And then after reapportioning, all the seats in the U.S. House are redistributed amongst the states to reflect population changes throughout each state. And then congressional district lines are redrawn. Not in order, during the Voting Rights Act, that pre-clearance aspect was to make sure that these newly redrawn districts did not unfairly marginalize or disadvantage African Americans in these new districts, or they weren't drawn in such a way, gerrymandered, if you will, in such a way that demobilizes them or decreases the chance for a representative to be elected that would represent their interests. So make sure there's no funny business going on. However, in 2013, in that Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court struck down the pre-clearance law. So that means in these new districts in the South, they no longer have to go through the Justice Department to be approved. And the reasoning for that was because the Supreme Court felt that in these new districts, nothing has ever happened, no funny business ever happened, and felt that that was actually a waste of resources, and we had moved on since then. At that time, we had a Black president. So the Supreme Court actually argued that it was not necessary to do that anymore. And so what ended up happening is what some people are arguing is that this change gave many new jurisdictions the power to impose new voting restrictions. So if you want to know more, you can take Voters and Elections with me. But the gist is that it's not necessarily the fact that these districts are drawing new lines in a way to disadvantage people of color or to marginalize minority ideas. It's that these new districts are instead exploring alternative ways to try and demobilize people, in particular, focusing more so on voter ID laws, changing access, and also increasing requirements necessary to be able to vote on Election Day. So we don't have a clicker, but I can just ask you all this. Do you think voters should be required to provide government-issued ID in order to vote?
Government issued or state?
Government issued, as the slide says.
Does that count as state or anything?
What would you like it to be? Right now it just says government.
Well, like I know for New York, no matter of your immigration status, you can get a New York ID. But so like I guess it depends. Because there is the issue with, I guess you can't see me, but like air quote voter fraud.
Yeah,
But like,
that's what I was going to say too. Voter, like people could go to multiple polling stations if they don't have to show any form of ID.
I think some form of government, like some form of paperwork, or like the voting needs to be overhauled. Does it
really?
The way voting is done, like the voting districts and all of that, has to be overhauled for gerrymandering and all of this. And to me, I don't know how. I'm not too educated on the way voting works, but I know.
That's why you're in college.
I mean, there should be a better, and this is proving it with the whole issue with canceling the primaries. Like, all states should have an easy option for absentee balloting. Like, even online, like, I'm shocked that we don't have, like, a secure system to, like, vote online.
I mean, but you know what? You got to blame the Russians in 2016.
That's true. But also the in-person voting machines have been shown at, like, hacker conventions how easy they are to hack.
I do recall like there was some like national hacker convention like 2017 or something, and they had one of those in-person ballot boxes, voting machines, and they were showing like there was like some 13 or 14-year-old that could hack it. It's really depressing, but I thought it was kind of cool.
Do you think?
Yeah, go.
Do you think if we go into martial law, they'll still send out absentee ballots during that time?
I was taught that when martial law takes place, it's the military rule. They suspend civilian stuff, and that would technically fall under civilian stuff.
Yeah.
We're going into martial law?
Oh yeah, that's right. You missed the first second class.
Can you send out an email with the link?
Okay, I'll start doing that.
Because Henry, I didn't see my phone. I totally forgot what time it was, and Henry just shot me a text saying, "Where are you on Zoom?" And he sent me the link. But yeah, that'd be good. And then so what's this martial law deal?
So word on the street, I'm not sure, is that we may or may not. So I have a cousin in the Air Force and then a cousin in the Army. They have both been called to active duty. They're in two different states. And they said it's because either on Friday or on Monday, Trump is going to declare martial law for 2 weeks and keep us all locked in our houses.
What?
Does that mean we can't go outside like at all? Or
that's what that means.
Martial law is like something you don't want to. Is that really?
Look,
that's crazy.
The Air Force and the Army. And I'm doing this because like they are in two totally different parts of the country.
Yeah, I do believe in that that Trump should issue a federal stay-at-home order.
I mean, but that's how it would work.
But I don't know if it needs to be enforced by the government. I mean,
how else are we going to keep the people in the house?
If you keep people in the houses for 2 weeks, we're going to go into anarchy.
How are we going to go into anarchy? So long as the internet stays on, I think we'll all be fine.
I know, but the way it works right now is you can stay, like in Ohio and like most other places, especially New York where it's worse. You're supposed to stay at home, but you can go outside for fresh air, go for a walk, as long as you maintain social distancing, and also go to the pharmacy and the grocery store. If they maintain social distancing, if they put in martial law, how are you going to get your groceries? How are you going to get your stuff? There's going to be a run on everything. That's just going to induce panic.
Well, I mean, that's why, like, and when it's going to happen, it's going to be like you can't let people know, hey, in 48 hours, it's going to be martial law, because like everything's going to be burnt down before it's too late. Like, you can't give people time to prepare. That's why you should know people that are in the know. Wink,
Isn't this a declaration? Isn't it a declaration of war? Martial
If you can't give people time to prepare, then like, what is the government going to have to do food runs to people's houses? Because
You
people
should. I
definitely
mean,
aren't going to have.
did you not get your toilet paper?
I mean, no, like my family is pretty well stocked, but I know that there are some people that like aren't super well stocked. Probably not for 2 weeks, and they'll kind of be screwed.
I mean, DeWine said this not almost a month ago. It feels like I've been stuck in the house for like 6 years, but he said this like he made us stay in the house like 2.5 weeks ago.
But
Yeah, but we're still allowed to go to like the
house. It's
Isn't it an April Fool's?
stay-at-home order. Non-essential businesses are closed. You can go to restaurants for takeout. You can go to the parks. You can't go to the playgrounds, and you can get your pharmaceuticals. And I believe that should be issued nationally. Trump should have done. Trump didn't. The issue was he treated this as a hoax and not real for so long that
you missed all the campaign ads at the beginning of class.
Yeah,
so.
that we're in this situation we were now. If we were prepared and we had the national stockpile of ventilators and we prepared for this coming, we wouldn't have all these strict guidelines. Like South Korea's back to functioning normally because they did mass testing.
I mean, wait, but y'all haven't heard there's like this whole new virus, the coronavirus, that's coming out of.
Yeah, that's been around forever.
So that's not new?
No, that doesn't transmit from human to human. That's from
Are we sure?
That's from animal to human. It's from animal to person. And that's in India.
And that's in India.
Going on forever. That was the issue. I saw those. Yeah, those headlines are misleading. Same with the approval rating. The ABC News only called 1,002 people, and 59% said they approved of Trump.
Okay.
But it's been a total. Mike DeWine and Andrew Cuomo and the governor of California have been the ones actually leading the way. Have you seen the press conferences?
Well, what with Trump, with the lady with the scarf? Every day she has such a fancy scarf on.
No, just how he acts. He treats it. The issue. News organizations should not broadcast the press address because he uses it as a campaign.
How else are we going to know?
They highlight the key details, but to watch the 90-minute press briefing,
we're supposed to be watching that.
But he's not doing a good job. Like whenever he's not talking, it's okay. When Dr. Fauci and the other doctor are talking, it's fine. That's why I like Mike DeWine's briefings. Like sometimes I watch the 2:00 press briefings because they're informative and they actually give you information.
Why is there no social distancing in the actual government ones, but then like when you go to the local state, then there's like social distancing happening like in those press conferences? That's what makes me like just.
Welcome to the Donald Trump administration.
No, they have Lysol and stuff. It's okay.
They all share the same microphone and crowd around the podium.
Yeah, it's totally there. It's like you can look at Ohio and you can look at New York and the way it's being handled, and that's the way it should be done. Florida and Louisiana, they're totally screwed coming up because
oh man,
they didn't. Louisiana had Mardi Gras and they didn't close Bourbon Street the first weekend, and they're gonna have the next biggest spike in cases. And Florida left the beaches open. Did you see those videos of the
They already do. I think they already do have the biggest spike right now.
Yeah, like I saw them. They were like out there partying on the beach, and like people. I want y'all have classmates that went to Florida, but I'll hush.
I was in Florida, but like that was when it wasn't that big of a thing. That was like over spring break when we were like, when we left, we were like, we'll be back in a week.
Y'all went to Florida for spring break.
Because it wasn't a big deal when we went.
This wasn't a thing. The issue was this was never taken seriously until it was too late, and we're playing catch up instead of preparing in advance.
I went to your class and took your midterm, and then went to Florida.
We gave away millions of pounds of supplies from our national stockpile,
and now we don't have ventilators. Maybe this is why we're going into martial law, so that way we won't need ventilators. If everybody stays in the house for 2 weeks, Ford and GMC and all these other car companies, they won't have to make ventilators.
That was good 2 weeks to go. Because it takes 2 weeks, it takes about, on average, 14 days for you to end up in the hospital. That's why they're saying peak in New York is April 15th, and they're projecting 892 deaths a day, which is absolutely terrifying.
Well, that's better than what the DeWine and what's her face are projecting for 10,000 deaths.
10,000 deaths total.
Absolutely no sense.
Wait, 10,000 a day here?
No, 10,000 total.
Oh,
Okay, well, I was gonna say if it's 10,000 a day, then like that's ridiculous.
The estimated amount of deaths in the country are between 100 and 250,000 because of we didn't flatten the curve. We flattened the curve. There's all the graphs are pretty interesting to look at, but we flattened the curve, but we didn't do everything we needed to do because we were 2 weeks behind of where we should have been.
It's like flatter, but not as flat as it should be.
We had the whole goal was to stretch out the virus to be below the hospital capacity, to make sure we wouldn't have any overrun of beds and rooms. You look at New York; they're totally screwed.
like yeah, I saw that picture on BuzzFeed. All the bodies laid out in the truck. I saw that.
Yeah, there are no more hospital beds, and they had to bring in the ship, and then there's a field hospital in Central Park, which is absolutely terrifying.
I mean, it's beautiful.
To go into martial law, I think would just be the scariest thing that could possibly happen.
But if you're in the house, why would it bother you? You think it just turns into the purge?
You just have to look at what happened when you tell all these free gun happy Americans that you can't leave your house and you don't have any freedom.
I'm just gonna take. If you stay in the house, you won't die. Like I don't understand.
But right now, everyone's staying in the house. But just to say martial law, just to make it militarily enforceable, is just another level.
So they probably won't say martial law. They'll probably say a federal mandate to stay in the house that will be enforced by the military.
Yeah, federal stay-at-home order.
Yeah, that'll be enforced by the military.
Yeah, that's the weird part.
Yeah,
that's the strange part. Is that I don't know. If I just order like the states to enforce it.
Yes,
Have we not learned? We just talked about like the differences in state response. If we make it a state's responsibility,
but like I would sign like an executive order that says like you had federal stay-at-home order, but like you have to at the same time, like I don't want to mobilize the entire military into enforcing this. That's gonna freak people. That's the part that's gonna freak people out.
When you see a tank driving down your street,
if you have like the 101st Airborne in your suburb. Like preventing
but if you would
from
stay
going outside.
in the house, if you stay in the house, it won't bother you. Like, are you just gonna be like freaking out? Like, is that a jet?
If I look out the window and like
don't look out the window.
What do you mean?
Don't look out the window.
What do you if you see the 101st Airborne go down? Where you
see? Like I have a window. I'm not looking out my window. I'm teaching. Okay, I'm minding my business.
If you looked out the window and like the 101st Airborne was just like out there, like don't come outside, that wouldn't freak you out at all.
I would be like, you ain't got to tell me twice. Mind my business.
You're
clearly, huh?
What I believed in what should have happened 2 weeks ago.
But it didn't happen, so now martial law.
Because this is all just playing catch up. It's not really gonna make a difference. 2 weeks ago, this would have made a difference if they did. I believe they should have done an interstate travel ban.
I think Connecticut has a travel ban. I have a student that's there now, and like nobody can leave Connecticut.
Yeah, and people are being if you leave New York State, you have to self-isolate for 14 days. But if federally, it would have been scarier. But if we just all stayed inside for 2 weeks and did minimum shopping, and it was we still had, if everyone in the country started for 2 weeks doing this social distancing, we would have been in a much better place than we're looking at now. Because we're not really going to be able to fully open until every state's gone through this, and every state's on a different trajectory.
And this is why we need the martial law for 2 weeks to force all the states to catch up.
At the end of the day,
there are no
walks. Happens.
Don't look out the windows. If you don't have a front yard or a backyard, that sucks. Like I don't. So all I can do is just go up and down my stairs. Maybe I can stand on the patio. But that's fine, so long as I have my internet,
So we can go into our yard and stuff if we go into martial law?
Like if you add, I mean, do you have a backyard?
Oh, you get shot on the spot.
Like if you have a backyard that's fenced in, I mean,
Like, I'm just
I
saying,
don't
if
look.
I'm
I
not
don't know.
able to
I've
go
never
out,
lived under martial law. Like the last time, like as I checked, the last time martial law was used, it was used in the '60s, immediately after Martin Luther King was killed.
Oh, what?
Nationally?
Nationally, yeah, to stop the riots and stuff that happened
uh,
after he was killed.
Did
So
that happen in Ferguson, Missouri too?
that they went into martial law.
Yeah.
Like if they called martial, like I didn't know they called martial
oh,
law
No,
after.
I don't know. I'm asking a question.
was Baltimore under martial law when they had those riots? And like the
What
National Guard
with
was
Freddie
called in?
Gray? What?
Yeah, I think so. It was a few years ago.
So it was called in to prevent riots in response to police brutality.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is totally different. I've never heard of.
Yeah.
We're
Whatever
all
happens,
learning something
happens.
new together. I don't know. So this is totally different. I mean, it's just for us to stay in the house.
Yeah. You should sell the story to the news. Be like you have the inside information. Be the
No, and what? And have my family members get killed, or they like check my
No,
background?
you have to do it Pentagon paper style. Like you do it anonymously from a phone booth somewhere.
But I have to get out the house to do so, and then I expose
You
like,
do it. You just do it before the martial law.
and
So
then
you
like,
go do it like
and where I'm gonna find a public phone? Like that's coronavirus. Duh.
just star 67 with
yeah,
your
star
own phone.
67 the news and voice change.
Anyways, for the last 8 minutes of class, let's get through these
Voter
charts.
turnout.
I can't. Voter turnout. So people don't vote in the United States. Let's see the nations that have like the highest one. Sweden. Sweden has like the highest for the other democratic nations. Let's see Australia, other places. The reason why, especially for Australia, Sweden, and another one, is because voting is obligatory. Like you have to turn out to vote. If you don't vote, there will be problems. So usually a fine. Usually a fine. That's all. And in fact, for America as a whole, our turnout is even lower than it was a century ago. And so the primary reason why that's actually the case is because between 1864 and we'll go with, yeah, even through when was that young folks could get the vote? 1971. 1971, when the age was lowered to 18. The reason why it dropped lower is because as the eligible voting pool population expanded, it had to account for that. So of course, back in 1864, well, yeah, that was like right before uh the 15th Amendment and all that good stuff, it was still only white men above the age of 21. However, after you added African American men, then women, of course, still during that time, we still had Jim Crow, which means that in the South, Black men and women were far less likely, had far shorter, less access to the ballot. And then once you then added 18-year-olds, lowered the age, just there were other things going on. And so it's become really more difficult. However, you will see that it appears to be on the upswing between 2000, well, yeah, 2008, even though there was a major dip between 2008 and 2020. I have to figure out why that is the case. It could actually just be a dip off as a result of people dying, but we'll find that out. So the biggest obstacle to voting is actually registering to vote. Some people don't vote on election day because they're not registered to vote. Let's see, and there are many reasons why people may not be registered to vote, but one of the biggest reasons why they are unable to vote is because they've recently moved. So, in fact, that's the biggest reason why young people don't vote. People between the age of 18 and 25 are the most transient group. Why? Because we're in school, undergrad, and then if you even like increase that from 18 to 30, also includes people like myself that were recently in grad school. We're in grad school, we're moving around, increasingly transient, and we are less likely to transfer our registrations. And if it's anything like you all, I heard for like OWU students, like you have to have multiple, like you have to have paperwork and bills to show when you go vote down in Delaware. And that even if you move from one dorm to another, you have to get that stuff done all over again so you'll be able to vote. So I guess it's a good thing we're all in our houses, so that way you didn't have to go through all that for the primary. But we'll speak it into existence. Once we are back face to face this fall, you'll see that it's a hassle. But it's a good hassle. And so all this graph shows is differences in voter registration rates back in 2012. Let's see if I can zoom this in. Da, 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 da. So as we see, there is a correlation between SES and voter registration rates. The more money you have, the more likely you are to be registered to vote. Likewise, in terms of education, the more educated you are, the more likely you are to vote. So you'll see high school dropouts, only half of them are registered to vote. Meanwhile, overwhelmingly, almost 82% of college graduates are registered to vote. In terms of employment, if you're employed, you're far more likely to be registered to vote. There is a racial disparity, but not that much so. We'll see that both blacks and whites, in fact, so 72% of whites, 73% of blacks, and about 56% of Asian Americans and about 59% of Latinos, they are all registered to vote. Overwhelmingly, there are overwhelming majorities in all racial/ethnic brackets. When we get down to age, of course, the older you are, the more likely you are to be registered to vote, which then turns into the more likely you are to vote. So you'll see that once we reach the old people bracket of 35 and above, overwhelming majority of those individuals are registered to vote. So we talked about who is registered to vote. Let's talk about how they vote. So since the secret ballot, as well as the Australian ballot came about in the 19th century, it has made it easier to vote. All the Australian ballot is just the electoral format that lists the names of all the candidates for any given office on the same ballot. So there's not a separate sheet of paper for each and every office that's up for grabs during an election. So let's see, I'm trying to think. So there used to actually, I don't know. And in another class, we'll talk about how OWU votes, since, of course, this will be streamed. The last thing I want is for anything to be said used against me in my tenure packet. So we'll talk about that later. But basically, the way that elections work for faculty governance, they have like separate ballots. And that like takes time and it's so onerous. But with thanks to this Australian ballot, if we had used that, it's all on one sheet of paper. You know who's, you can vote for the person that's running for county coroner, as well as the people that are running for, not the school, would the school board also be on there? Yeah, the school board would be on there. You would also know who's running for mayor. You'd know who's running for county sanitation director, the comptroller, all of that, all on one ballot. And so that is nice. However, with the Australian ballot, it's far more likely to benefit incumbents because with that, you can, on the ballot, it'll show you which one is the one that's currently holding the office if it is a challenged race. Meanwhile, party ballots, prior to this Australian ballot, party ballots were just ballots that showed for party members who was the party's choice, and basically you just had no choice but to vote for the party person. So we will stop here and we will pick back up here on Friday. Fingers crossed, internet will still be on. We won't be under martial law. Yeah. Huh?
One would hope.
Hope. If not, then I can start like a whole vlog talking about day 3 under martial law. This is fun. I think they've discovered my toys and they've come to get my Eeyores and my SpongeBobs. And if you're watching this, it means, I did not make it to Mexico well, actually, no. Would I go to Mexico? No. Oh, I did forget. I was reading an article that about these two people. They were from somewhere in the Midwest. They had decided, they drove to Quebec and had sold all of their possessions. And they did so they could buy an airplane ticket to go to this remote Native American, so actually they're in Canada, so first person's reservation. only had 250 people there because they thought that it would be best to camp out and wait out the pandemic in this First Nations indigenous settlement. And then the sheriff, which is one of the indigenous persons there, found out and actually sent them back to Quebec, saying like, you can't come here. We don't have doctors. I'm the only like authoritative person here. It was wild. Just wanted to share that too. Like people are now like, so don't like if you know people that are trying to plot and go to Native American reservations, tell them don't do that. That's not right. Smart but not smart. Just go like camp out in the woods. I think that's probably your best bet. Just like hide out in Yellowstone. I wouldn't do it, but makes sense. But yeah, that's all I have. Any questions or anything? No.